It might be somewhat of an understatement to say that when it comes to monarchy, the feelings of Americans are probably a bit ambivalent. On the one hand, who isn't captivated by the majesty of the pomp and ceremony we can see televised from those nations whose head of state is a king or a queen, especially on big occasions such as royal weddings or funerals or other traditional ceremonies of state? Yet in our own nation, for nearly 250 years now, we have rejected monarchy as a form of government in favor of a democratic republic, whose head of state doesn't serve by their inherited right, nor is their term ever permanent. Indeed, resistance to autocracy is embedded in the very fabric of our nation, and it's certainly evident in the spirit of our own day and age. We cherish our individual freedoms and are very sensitive to any attempt of anyone in power to encroach upon them, always ready to resist that, to protest or even rebel if necessary. Yet with that as our context, can we appreciate the challenge that this feast we celebrate today places before us? Because it reminds us quite clearly that ultimately there is still one king whose authority over us we would be wise to accept, one king whose kingdom we should desire to belong to, and against whose power it would be to our peril to rebel. Of course, that is Christ the King. King not of a single nation, but king of the entire universe. Not a monarch whose tenancy on a throne is lifelong, but rather the only king whose reign is eternal. Yet we know that in a culture imbued with individualism, which prizes autonomy, there are those who do still rebel against Jesus Christ, who question his very identity, who doubt his power, who challenge his authority, and thus who end up disobeying his laws. But as the gospel today makes clear, this resistance to him by some isn't limited to our own day and age. It's actually existed since his very appearing among us as that profound preacher and amazing healer from Nazareth. And even though his words bore witness to his infallible knowledge and wisdom, and his miracles testified to the truth of his divine nature, there were still those who rejected him, including, as we see in the gospel, even those in authority who had been steeped in the scripture and in the law, who might have known better, but who obviously felt threatened by him and thus foolishly thought that they could somehow eliminate him. And at the end of Jesus' earthly life, the two crucified alongside him really represent the response of all humanity to him. On the one hand, there was one who derided Jesus and dismissed him, but the other recognized the truth of his ultimate identity and believed in him and the kingdom he promised. Thus we learn anew from this gospel that faith in Jesus Christ as Lord and King is the surest path to where we should all one day want to be, which is in his company forever, because that in itself is paradise. Yet our destiny to live in light with the saints, as our second reading reminds us, in paradise with Christ, isn't guaranteed merely by acquiring certificates alone, but sadly, there are those who do collect sacramental certificates as if they do provide such insurance. Rather, not only by receiving the sacraments, but especially by recognizing the truth of Christ's kingship as evidenced by our faithful prayer to him and our faithful worship of him, and acknowledging his authority over us by trying to obey his laws. That's how we reveal ourselves to be his true subjects. In other words, it is by our embracing the sometimes rather difficult work of ongoing conversion each and every day that our identity as his true followers will be proved. Indeed, let us not be fooled by what we see on television, in that authentic conversion doesn't come with an altar call. It doesn't happen as a dramatic, once and done change of mind and heart and manner of living. Rather, it's the conscious effort, each and every day, of struggling to subvert our own will to that of Jesus Christ. When we succeed at doing so, it will become very clear to others that we embrace the gospel and divine law above all other worldly power and authority. And thus it will be the love, the compassion, the integrity, the justice, and the mercy, not only heard in our words, but especially seen in our actions, that will be evidence of our willing submission to Jesus Christ as King, and thus provide ultimate proof of our citizenship in that realm in which he reigns, the realm that will last forever.